The group, written in stone, has about 1,000 members now. And recently, one of the members came forward after we had been discussing the Booth House at great length and working furiously to organize this event, with the information that his grandparents had lived in that house in the 1950s. The grandfather remembered seeing signs for feed and flour in front of the house. We know that Booth had a store in Wilbur, and he may have sold from his house before opening a store at some point. We also know that the grandmother, during the couple's tenure in this building, researched the origin of the house and determined that this is actually an 18th century structure underneath. This is a house built in 1770. Now, this is the interesting part for those of you who care. There is no precedent in the 18th century historic limestone houses of Ulster County for applying an outer veneer of decorative stone over the top of the structure. But this is what we have at the Booth House. The house at its base is a limestone structure, and it has a wooden frame underneath. The wooden frame underneath is what supports the idea, the theory that this is actually, in fact, an 18th century house. I am told that there are records existing in City Hall, in possession of the city government, that substantiate the building date of this house is actually in the 18th century. So, there are limestone quarries nearby in Wilbur, and I have heard the name DeWitt mentioned as a possible family of the builder for the house as it originally stood in the 18th century. So, Nathaniel Booth acquires a house that is already 80 years standing, and he is a bluestone dealer in possession of a limestone house along the toll road where tons of bluestone slabs are dragged down every day from the quarries in Saltgill and Woodstock down to the docks in Wilbur for their final cut, to be cut into the finished pieces that are loaded onto barges, and most of them shipped off to New York City. Booth had available to him all of these pieces. He had the scrapings and leftovers of the pieces that were cut there on the docks. The final cutting was done at the bottom of the hill. And he was a bluestone dealer living in a limestone house. And he was certainly, I'm going to make the assertion that he was the one who covered the limestone house with the bluestone. There is a veneer of bluestone, cut pieces, nicely fitted together, squared off pieces, that surrounds the original structure. So this is, aside from its historical significance and its association with the illustrious Nathaniel Booth and the bluestone industry and the D&H Canal, this is also architecturally an exceptional structure. The parts of the wall, the little bits of stone that started falling off a couple weeks ago that created the entire uproar about the imminent threat to public safety leading to the demolition order, these stones were actually part of the veneer of bluestone that was applied to the outside of the structure. So the veneer falling off is not an indication that the building is unstable. Absolutely not. It's important to know that the story of Nathaniel Booth is a new one. A month ago, hardly anyone knew about the house. A month ago, hardly anyone knew very much about the man. I thank all the distinguished speakers who came here today to inform us about Booth. He sounds like a fascinating character. And I thank all of the local elected officials who today spoke about ways that we can, moving forward, look to implement policy so that we don't get stuck again in a situation where we're facing the wrecking ball at the 11th hour before we decide that something must be done. We do have some time at the end here. I wanted to make a strong finish, and I've told you everything that I know about the building. The most important thing is that we do have a plan. There is a way forward for us to move, but the decision is the mayor's, and the demolition order still stands. So, I'd like to thank you all very much for coming today. We do have a question and answer session here. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Bill Rhoads. Thank you, Ed Ford. Thank you, Lowell Thing. Thank you very much, Stuart Blumin. Thank you, Geoffrey Miller. Thank you to Brad's team of elected officials, and now you're going to take over and say something. Please.
Thank you. In fact, we have one more very brief speaker. I don't know how brief, but we're fortunate to have with us our Honorable Alderman from the 2nd Ward, Douglas Cooper, who would like to say a few words.
I'd like to thank my colleague on the Common Council here, Brad, for his leadership in providing that. I think it's just been an outstanding symposium on historic preservation in the Hudson Valley. And the more we learned, the more I learned about Nathaniel Booth and then the specifics of the house. But I just have to offer one personal observation, which during Eileen's talk I got very, very excited about. When the map finally came up on the computer, and I saw the D&H Canal going through the metropolises of Godefroy and Postupackville, with the Neversink River that comes into the canal. Go back to 1946 when my family moved from Queens up to a house right on the Neversink River. And I went to a one-room schoolhouse, walked along railroad tracks to go to school. But we swam, my brothers and I swam in that very, very spot. So it just brought it all back to me. It's a wonderful park there today, which I'm sure you're aware of. It's worth a stop there. Other than that, I would say that as chairman of the Finance Committee of the Common Council, I would be delighted not to have to pay that $35,000. That would make the money's there in the contingency part of the budget, but that's no reason to spend it. There are lots of other things we could do with this, and I think we should exhaust all possibilities, as has been said by a couple of the speakers, to let's really chase this down to the end. We owe it to our own historic preservation and history. If it comes to it has to go down, okay, so be it. But let's exhaust every possibility to do that, because it's a wonderful facility, and I hope something can be done. So thank you again for your attendance today.
If folks want to stick around for a question and answer of any of our panelists today, this is the time to do it.
I have a question to start with. I don't want Dr. Blumin to get away without telling us a little bit more about our city.
You can read the book.
I am reading the book, and I'm going to ask questions based on that book. I know since you've been spending time with Jeff, you've probably been caught up on the Rare Center for Immigrant History and Culture that he's leading in the Rondout. There's also an Irish Cultural Center under development. And I'd like you to say a little bit about the Irish coming here, because not only is this a landmark of the American Industrial Revolution because of the Coal Canal, but also it's a real chapter in early Irish history. And also say something about in America. And also say something, early Irish history in America. And also say something about the huge growth in the city over that just very short time.
It's a story that I think that most of you do know, that when the potato failed in Ireland, massive numbers of Irish left Ireland, but massive numbers died. Massive numbers went to England, mainly from the east side of Ireland, but from the southwest and west parts of Ireland particularly. The most, I'm afraid, almost afraid to use the term, but underdeveloped, most remote, poorest part of Ireland, the beautiful southwest, sent so many people to the Americas. Most of them, of course, they came through the existing shipping routes, which meant that a lot of people came to New York. By no means the only port of entry, but New York was probably the most significant port of entry. It was the biggest port in the world, or the Western world at that point, almost on its way to being the biggest port in the world. So here we are, 90 miles north, with an enormous demand for cheap labor. Now that this is a canal town, it's a quarrying town, it's a limestone mining and cement manufacturing town, and other sort of ancillary things, wintertime lumbering up in the mountains. Enormous demand for cheap labor. So it was inevitable that there would be a very large number of Irish coming to Kingston in the late 1840s through about the mid-1850s. Joined, by the way, by another very large contingent uprooted from Germany. In fact, in that period of time, that of massive immigration, and I want to point out, by the way, that the proportion of immigrants to the total population of the United States in the 1850s was every bit as high as it is today. These Irish who Catholic Irish almost entirely, who frightened the native population did a pretty good job of integrating into this country and have added quite a bit to this country in those years and beyond. In fact, there's a point that's almost never made about the appearance of the Irish immigrants and the German immigrants in that period of time. We're talking about millions of people. The total population in the United States in 1860 was only 30 million. All right, so there were at least 15% of the population was Irish or German immigrants. This came at a time just when industrial technologies were changing and manufacturing organization was changing, even without new technologies, that created an enormous need for inexpensive labor. This country's industrial sector took off in those years. Why did it take off? Yeah, there were people inventing things, sewing machines, textile machines, all sorts of things that helped. Probably the most important thing that underlies the growth of the United States, the economic growth, the demographic growth of the United States, were these Irish who need not apply. All right, these $1-a-day workmen down on the docks in Rondout, loading coal, on the island dock from barges and loading them on larger boats to get out of New York, and doing all the other kind of work that a lot of other people are not interested in doing for $1 a day. That's a very important thing to recognize. It has continuing relevance, doesn't it? It has continuing relevance. If you want to think about Mexican immigrants to the United States today, those are the Irish, are Irish, all right? The future is bright. We shouldn't be afraid. Okay? Thank you for asking that.